So thanks for the invite to your show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you guys for taking part, man. We really, really appreciate it, especially taking some time out to talk with us about it. Because, quite frankly, this looks really cool.
Great. Always love to hear that.
Yeah, we appreciate the exposure.
Now, so is it just you two, or is it kind of like a little small studio thing, or what all do you guys have going on there?
So primary development is just me and Jeff. So I'm in, this is Steve speaking. I'm in Los Angeles, and I do the gameplay design and all the programming. And we, Jeff is the art director. He does all the audio direction, sound effects, all the animations, all the textures, modeling. We have a little bit of help on a couple of art assets from one of Jeff's friends, and all of the music is done by a part-time composer named Wilbert Roger, who's really amazing. Yep. But yeah, just two of us full-time, and then significant part-time help from Will, and a little bit of help from Jeff's friend. I believe his name is Josh Powers. Is that right?
Yeah, Josh Powers. Yeah, he's given us a little bit of help with some weapon models that still need to be created. Living the dream, baby.
Yeah.
Unpaid full-time work for years on end, right, Steve?
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's honestly, it's the only way to get your foot in the door really anymore. It's hard. It's hard because we kind of experience that on our end too. Like, I got to work a day job just so that I could support doing something like this.
Steve and I come from 15, 16, 17 years in AAA. So we worked at a lot of big studios, and this is something we wanted to do for a long time. So, saving up our money, being responsible financially, and to allowing ourselves to take this risk, we've been making games for a long time. This is our first indie game that we've made together, but we're kind of pulling all of our knowledge together that we learned on big studio projects,
Yeah, I saw that list. It's impressive, man. Borderlands, BioShock, Command & Conquer, Saints Row, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's been a good run, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of fun to get to work on some of those cool franchises, but as you might imagine, being on big teams means that each individual person only has so much influence. So we wanted to be on something where we had complete influence, and here we go.
That's the best way to do it, right?
Perfect way to do it. That's a key word, though, influence. I was kind of curious as to what were some of the main inspirations, influences behind something like this, because it's pretty unique.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I mean, a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. We draw from lots of different games and all kinds of genres, but I mean, you'll see stuff from Strider, Dark Souls, Cave Story, of course, the classics, Metroid, Zelda, but yeah, we draw from endless. It's not really there's no real sort of spiritual successor to anything that we're trying to be, but we do pay homage to a lot of different of our favorite games.
Yeah, I think high level inspiration is, Steve and I are roughly the same age, and we grew up playing these types of games, like action exploration games for the Nintendo, Super Nintendo. So we just love making those types of games. And I mean, for me personally, I sort of just had a creative vision for the world and the story and the look and sort of emotional tone of the game. So, I just creatively, I'm just kind of doing what I find personally interesting, tonally, right? Visually, sound, animation. And the great thing about a two-person project is the only person that can tell me no is Steve. And we're usually on the same page. So it's been a really great process of working together.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the modern way these days anyways, right? And quite frankly, I find it, like you said, it's almost more efficient that way. There's only a couple of you, and with there being only a couple of you, the communication is that much more fluid and it's that much more immediate, I guess would be a good way to put it. It's efficient, it's quicker. It's not got to go through like 3 or 4 different channels before it gets back around to the person that originally brought it up or to get feedback or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the game that we're making is it's a big game, and it's very, very complex. There's a lot of, there's just a lot going on. There's a lot of systems interplaying with one another. There's a lot happening. We've set a pretty high bar visually as far as animation and world design and stuff like that. So kind of like what Steve said, we've had a couple of really great former colleagues say, hey, we'd love to work on the project. But the game is really deep, and it's really hard. It's a really hard process to make a game, especially like the one we're making. And it's just, even though it's going to take us more time to make the game in the long run, it's like the amount of time and effort it would take to have to get these folks up to speed and explain all the complexities of our systems. It's just easier most of the time for us to just do it ourselves. And Steve and I can sort of read each other's minds at this point, and we communicate very quickly and efficiently. So yeah, it's working. It just takes time, and a lot of hours.
Yeah, I could imagine. And it does. Complex is something that really stands out visually right off the bat. Like if you scroll through your guys' Twitter feed, one of the things that really stood out to me a couple of weeks ago was the interactive foliage with the guy running around and all the plants and stuff in the background just kind of waving behind him. And it's beautiful. It really is. It looks really, really good. It's very fluid. It's very neat looking. It's very cool. And that really stuck out and caught my eye. And another thing that stuck out to me was some of the like the gravity, the way that the gravity you can see affects the gameplay a certain way. And I think that's really neat. I'm very interested to see how that plays out. But that's got to be really hard to do, right?
Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing, that for most people that play games don't really understand how games are made. And that's fine. That's just sort of the nature of it. But a lot of times, when someone sees something that looks beautiful, there's something visually beautiful, or there's something that sounds really, really cool. It's not just the artist that's doing that. There's an incredible amount of quote unquote back end stuff going on, right? Like tons of code and scripting and custom stuff that Steve is doing, programming and math essentially, to allow me to do what I want, like what my vision is visually, and like pull off all these really cool visual things, right? That makes the world feel immersive and real. There's just so much happening technically that Steve has to do to enable that. So I always like to give him as much credit as I possibly can.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
But yet, gravity, interesting gameplay around gravity in and of itself isn't too challenging, but we've got a lot of semi-complex systems, and it's the interactions between these systems is where the complexity comes from. So, for example, if we've got, like, Anew has a whole bunch of different really wacky, exciting, giant vehicles that you can pilot and maneuver, and your player can jump out and swim through water. Kind of that particular feature was inspired by how Ori and the Blind Forest does their swimming. And once you have a big set of these sort of gameplay systems, and you want them to interact in interesting ways, that's where the complexity gets really kind of crazy, when you're being ambitious in a lot of different directions at once, and you want that gameplay depth that arises from these interesting systems interacting. It's tough, but you're rewarded with deep gameplay. So players get to, like every time you get a new pickup item, it's instantly, sure, it's got its obvious uses, but it's also kind of like a new toy that you have to kind of explore and test it out and see how it works in all these different scenarios, and how it interacts with all the other different game systems. And so I've always been a fan of games that work like that, as opposed to just having hundreds of different guns with a slight stat tweak on them. This is sort of like each gun or each weapon or each piece of equipment is a complete game changer that that you have to explore with all these different game systems to make the most of it. Yep. Oh, and we plan on being out maybe Q2 next year or sooner.
So
I guess that means we got to get back to work.
Yeah. Well, I thank you guys a lot, man. Steve, Jeff, it's been really fun talking to you guys, and this is just, I really look forward to this. I don't know if next spring, summer can come quick enough for me.
We're doing our best, we promise, and just shoot us an email and keep in touch, and we'll let you know how things are going.
Will do, man. Thanks a lot, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.